All right. So in this activity, what we're going to do is we're going to make our data sending a little bit more complicated. This time we're going to be able to send two pieces of information. When I press A, I'm going to want to send temperature data to my other microbits. When I press B, I'm going to want to send light data to the microbit. So adding a little bit of more complication to it. But once you can do this, then you can really begin to see some of the other functionality that you can begin to think about when you network microbits together. Okay. So this one I'm going to do a little bit differently. And one of the key features when we're beginning to teach kids about computation and computational science is the idea of breaking down complex problems into smaller parts. And so I'm going to actually make this a program in terms of functions or smaller components of a larger program. So I'm first going to create a couple of functions. Functions, again, are kind of mini programs that we can call, and they add together to make a larger program. I'm going to make a first function. I'm going to call it getData. Okay? And it makes this block that shows up on my screen here, and I'm going to move it closer to my OnStart and Forever. And I'm going to make another function, and I'm going to call it sendData. Okay, so this is going to be the function that's going to send the data to my microbit. All right. So first thing we need to do is get all of our microgroups then assigned to the same group. So we do that in our radio block. And I'm going to make my radio block. I'm going to call this group 33. It doesn't matter as long as when you download the program, all the microbits that you want to communicate with each other are assigned group 33. Okay. Now, the other set of things that I want to do is I want to collect some data. Okay. So I'm going to need to declare some variables. So let's make a variable. I'm going to call this variable light. And let's make another variable and call it air temperature. Okay, whoops, let me get all the spelling right. Okay. So now I've got two variables, air temperature and light. I'm going to drag these guys over as set block into my function of getData. I'm going to set my air temperature to the temperature reading of my microbit, and that's under my input block. So when I scroll down, you see where I've got my temperature. All right, I can control C and control V, so copy and paste and duplicate that block. And now I can change my variable to light, and I don't want temperature anymore. But this time I now want to go back to my input block and go down and grab my light oval. So now I've got a temperature called air temperature. It is getting the temperature reading on the microbit. I've got a light variable, and it is getting the light variable from my microbit. Now let's go over here and let's look at my sendData function. So what I want to do with this is I want to have it where I press A, send my temp. When I press B, send my light. So this is basically a logic statement. You can also do it the input block by on button A, on button B, but let's do this with a logic statement. So if I go through and I'm going to say if, then something happens. Right? So I'm going to say if button A under my input is pressed, what I want to do is go to my radio. I want to send a number. Okay. The number that I want to send is my variable air temperature. Okay. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little clear screen at the end. Otherwise, it's going to keep scrolling for a little bit, so I just want to kill that. Okay. And now if you begin to see that you're getting a lot of decimal points after that, you can even go in here and do math, and you can choose round. And you can take this air temperature down and choose round air temperature. And so that will make it rounded to the nearest 10. So if you're getting 25.7, it'll round it to 26 for you, which can be kind of nice when it's scrolling across the microbit. Okay. Now, let's say I want B. So I actually am going to copy and paste this entire if-then statement. So I highlighted it, copied it, paste it, and I'm going to drag it right underneath of that if statement. And so now I can just say, change my A to B. All right. This time, instead of rounding my air temperature, I'm going to do my light. Okay. And the light is only going to be in integers, so the round is a little redundant here, but you know, it's fine. It doesn't matter that you include that. It doesn't slow the program down any. So now I've got my send data. So if A is pressed, send my air temp. If B is pressed, send my light. Now I need a receive block. Right? Now I'm sending it. Now I need a microbit to receive it. So I want to go to my radio group. And since I'm getting numbers, we're going to choose on radio received. Right? So now I've got on radio received. And what I want to do is I want to show the number based upon what happens when I press the buttons. So I'm going to go to basic. I'm going to show my number. And now, again, as we saw in one of the previous videos, this is where it gets a little tricky. You can take this receive number, and when you drag it down, notice it turns into a variable. And so now I can drag it right there. And so it's going to have, so the receive number that it gets is going to show on the screen. Now, to really run this, notice my forever loop is blank. So right now, if I left this as is, what will happen is it will go on start, it'll set the radio group, it'll go to forever, nothing will happen. Why I like functions is now, instead of having all of these blocks in the single forever loop, which can sometimes be a little hard to troubleshoot, I can just call the get data. It's going to grab that function. Then I'm going to call send data, and it's going to run this function. So now my program is going to go on start. It's going to set my groups to all 33. It's going to call my get data function, and it's going to call my send data function. And then this on radio received is always running in the background. Okay? So it's always there. Now, all I have to do is transfer my code. So there, my microbit connected. Alright, my light's flashing on the back, which means the code is transferring, and I get a little download completed sign. I'm going to do the same thing to two of the microbits that I have here, so that both of them have the same code on them. Okay. Alright, so now I've got one charging. I'm going to plug another microbit here into a battery so it has power. Okay. So now if I press A on one microbit, my temperature should scroll across the screen. Okay. There it is. Looks like it's about 28 degrees. Okay. Now I'm going to press B. Alright. 920 is my light reading. Okay, so one of the things that we'll do in another video is what's the light reading that it's reading is it's reading the current that is generated when light strikes the LED, and it's converting that to a number. And so we've got a little function that has calibrated that, and so now we can correlate that to an actual light luminosity reading.